It is Friday, February 28th. Hey, Abby. So this is the rest of Chapter 7.4 in the AP Computer Science Java programming that we're doing. So we were learning about the two new commands, the printf and the format. And so we've only been able to talk about printf so far. And we're going to continue talking about just a couple more things about the printf. As you can see on my screen is the example of the table that you see on page 255, where they have examples, but it was hard to see, so that's why I put this on Excel, so you can actually see, and I put the number of which column we're in. So you already know about the %f, you already know about %d, you already know about %f, as well as you know for s for strings and %n for new lines. You also know that in between the % sign and the letter, you could also add in some additional modifiers. Now, we've already talked about what the .2 means. That is, point means show the decimal place, and 2 means how many decimal places do you want to show after that. So you already know what this means right here. Now, obviously, you can change that to .3 to show 3 decimal places, or .5 to show 5 decimal places for the number that you're trying to show for this floating point number here. And the example here, we have the integer 34 and the number 56.7. So we have an integer and a floating point number. And if we want to print it out, we'd put this quote right here inside of the printf statement, and then followed by, of course, comma, and then the variables that these numbers are stored in, right? So obviously, that 34 is going to print out in this place right here of the %d, and this 56.7 is going to print out in place of this %f. But what in the world is this 7 here? So that's what I want to teach you right now before we move on to a couple other examples as well as the format command. So this 7 here, now notice it goes before the .2. If you have a number before this .2, and again, the whole thing is after the % sign and before the f, right? Or before the d or the s or whatever it is, right? If you have a whole number before the decimal places, that tells you how many spaces are you allowed total for this entire thing to print out, this f to print out, this floating point. So you have a field of 7 that you are allowed to print this out in. So let's take a look at this example here. So if we printed out 34 and 56.7, but we said %d and we said %7.2f, what's going to happen is that by default, as you can see, this 34, if we don't tell it anything, there's no modifiers in between this % sign and this d sign, it's just going to go ahead and print it out. See, 34. And it's going to go ahead and print that out right as is. And notice that it's left justified. If you don't specify anything, by default, it's going to be on the left-hand side. There's no spaces in front of it. And although it looks like there's spaces after it, there's 2 spaces after it, it's not because of this %d, and it's not because of this 34. It's actually because of this other thing here that we're going to look at. Okay, so let's go ahead and now move on to the more confusing part. This 56.7, well, first of all, you should understand the easy part of this. It's showing up as a 56.70. Well, why is it showing up as a 56.70? Well, because it's saying to show 2 decimal places, right? We have the .2 saying 2 decimal spaces. So although it only needs to take up 1 decimal space, it's taking up 2. So it's 0.70 instead of 0.7. Okay, so that's the easy part. Now, we told it, look at this whole number before the .2. It's telling you what the field is, the total amount of space, the field amount that I have to print out into to show this f inside of this floating point. I have a field of 7. Now look at what I've just highlighted here. 56.70, how many field spaces does that take up? A lot of students will say, oh, that takes up 4. Well, no, because the decimal place actually has to take up 1 space as well, right? So although there's only 4 numbers, the decimal space takes up one space too. So that's taking up five spaces in order to print out a 56.7. But we've told it you have up to a field of, you have a field of 7 to print it out into. So look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, print out this floating point number, give it 2 decimal places and show the decimal point, and give it an area, a field of 7 total columns to be able to put that into. So there it is, see? It fits perfectly in here. Now, with 2 spaces ahead of it. Well, why are there 2 spaces ahead of it? Why didn't it put the 56 right here in the 3rd column? Well, because by default, sorry, I misspoke before. By default, numbers are going to print out right justified. So again, apologies for my misspeak when I talked about this 34. Numbers by default are going to print out right justified. So that's why even though this takes up 5 spaces, it had 7 area for 7, so it printed out with 2 spaces in the front because it's right justified. Let's go back and look at this 34. My apologies. This 34 also printed out right justified. Oh, there's an announcement. Let me pause this.
Your children are outside in the hallway in the sunken gym for you. Again, Baker and Fidelis, your children are in the hallway by the sunken gym.
Okay, sorry for that interruption there. Okay, so let's take a look at this again. We have this 34. It's a number, just like this 56.7. So by default, all numbers will be handled right justified. Well, we didn't specify a field how much room we want in between this. So by default, if you don't give it how much room you want, it'll give you exactly how much room you need. So this 34 takes up 2 spaces. So 1, 2. And next comes the 56.7, which we told you have 7 spaces to print it out into, including the decimal point. So that's why you have 2 spaces in between there. Hopefully that makes sense. I can't ask you, but I can ask you, I guess, on Monday if that makes sense. If not, maybe stop and pause and rewatch the video and also read the book. The book will explain that as well. So let's just move on, because I'm hoping you understand it, and if not, the book will help you. Let's take a look at the other 2 examples. And again, the book doesn't show the spaces, so it's a little bit harder to see. So we have the same numbers again. But this time it's going to print out like this. Oh, what's going on here? Well, let's take a look line by line. We say %4D. Oh, so we do specify how much room we're giving this to print out. Now, obviously, a 34 only takes 2 spaces, but we're saying, hey, you can have 4 spaces to print out your 34. So look, again, numbers are printed out right justified by default. So look, we have the 34, but it's taking up 4 spaces, so there's 2 spaces in front of it. Now let's deal with this %7.2f. So it's the same as what was in the first example. So you're saying you have 7, a field of 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now go ahead and print out the 56.7, including the decimal space, including 2 decimal places after the decimal point. And numbers are going to be right justified. So that's why it's going to be, that's why the answer for this is space 34, space 56.70. Okay, third example. Ooh, look at this, a -4D? What's going on here? Well, minus, again, if you look at the bottom of page 254, it forces something to be left justified. And numbers, as you know, are already right justified by default. So look here, we're saying -4D. So we're going to print out this, we're going to have a field of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, because we have that 4. And because it's minus, now it's going to be left justified instead of right justified as it was in the second example. But it's still going to take up that amount of space, 4 spaces. So these extra 2 spaces are still going to be there. Now look at this. We put a $sign in there. Well, $signs, whatever You can have other, characters and things like that, or words or whatever you need inside there. They're just going to print out as is, as long as they're inside the double quotes here, yeah? So that dollar sign is just going to show up right there. But then look what we do. Percent 7.2f. So we're giving it, again, a field of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it's a 7.2f, so it's same as what it's above. Well, Ms. Yang, isn't that strange? Why do they have 2 spaces, between the dollar sign and the 56.7? Well, I bet the person who did this meant for it to be together, but the computer will not do what you meant it for. It will not do what you meant it to do. It will do what you told it to do. So that's why, yes, there are 2 spaces in between the dollar sign and the 56.70. Okay, last example. Negative 4D, so same thing as above. But here, they got it right. They did the dollar sign, and they wanted the 56 to be right up against that dollar sign. So look, they just didn't even specify a field. If you don't specify the field amount, it will automatically take up as much space as it needs to take up. So 5 in this case. Well, Ms. Yang, if I put a 5 right there, what will happen? Well, nothing different. It will show up exactly as what it is if you don't put anything, because it's automatically going to take up 5 anyways, right? So there it is. That dollar sign's right next to this 56.70. Okay, hopefully you understood that. Your homework will ask you questions like this, so hopefully you understand how to do that. We are now ready to move on to string. Okay, so string, there's another command here called string. And let me see here. Okay, so let's pretend I created a string called myString. Okay, well, I guess we don't have to worry about that, but let's just look at this the correct way, and I do want to introduce the incorrect way. The way that you use format, okay, the way that you use this is you actually call on string, like as in this string, like the actual data type, string.format. So no, it's not system.out.format, right? It's string.format. So I misspoke at the earlier on at the beginning of the chapter where I said all of these are system.outs. No, format is not. It's actually a method that's inside of the string class. So you actually have to call on string and then .format. Now what this does, for example, the word race, I'm going to go ahead and put that left justified in a field of 15. And this, of course, is a string. So I would do an S instead of like an F or a D, right? So that's what's going to happen. Now, this does not print out anything. Format does not print out anything. Another announcement, sorry.
Please come to the security desk. Ivory IO, please come to the security desk right away.
Okay, Ivory's in trouble. Okay, so unlike system.out.print or printline or system.out.printf, format does not print out anything. All it does is create this in this kind of a field. So it's not printing it. So what you're going to have to do if you want to keep what you've just made here, guess what you have to do? You have to go ahead and throw it into a string. And then later on, you can go ahead and print out my string, and then it will print out race in a field of 15 and left justified, right? So this does not print out anything again. So the 2 common mistakes that students make when they use this is they think this is going to print out something. No, it does not. And they use this incorrectly, right? They actually do it this way. They create a string, and then they go ahead and say, well, my string.format. This is actually not correct. You actually have to call on string and then say format. And I suppose the third thing students get messed up on this is they do the work, but they forget to hold on to it into a actual string variable so they can actually use it later on, right? So I don't think you'll pretty much ever do this here highlighted in black by itself without actually holding on to it over there, okay? Now, you could also obviously throw this entire thing here inside of a print line or something like that, and that should work as well. But usually if you're going to format it, it means that you're going to print it out later, and so usually students will hold on to it for later usage. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of the chapter, and I hope this makes sense. And good luck with your 7.4 homework, and I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Talk to you later.